I appreciate everybody's patience and joining us as we pull all of this together. My name is Jesse DeMumbrian Chapman. I'm the Executive Director and Riverkeeper at Coosa River Basin Initiative, and we are so thrilled to invite y'all to join us in this conversation as a live recording event for the Downstream podcast, a project of Coosa River Basin Initiative. This project is 18 months in the making, longer conceptually, and has been, it's taken us far out of our comfort zones. The backstory, when it was still pandemic times, if you can go with me there, and we were still doing 99% of our business on Zoom, we got into the kind of very beginning where people were introducing themselves and giving land acknowledgements. This was a very common way that Zoom meetings were started. And I loved the intent of doing that, but it also felt really thin to me. And so Courtney and I, Courtney Altus, who you will meet in a moment, had a conversation about, all right, we're sitting here on this watershed that is just steeped in so much Native American history. What does something more meaningful look like in terms of a land acknowledgement? And we kind of just kicked around some ideas until we landed on a limited series podcast. And we had several ideas for even what the format of that podcast might be. Very early on, we pulled together some great stakeholders that helped just give us some wisdom about creating a podcast and what this could look like. We very quickly realized that there are about 1 million ways we could do this wrong. And that was intimidating for us. And we hope that y'all hear in every episode as we release this and in our conversation tonight, how deliberately we've gone about this work. Our intention, the flaw that we saw, one of the early ideas was for the podcast to be more focused on history. So kind of paint an arc of time and talk about, pre-Mississippian culture and move forward in time. And the problem with that approach, and I don't have any trouble with history, and I think that it's wonderful and it's something that we need to maintain, but we have a lot of it. We have a lot of good historical resources, even in our community. But what focusing solely on the history does is it treats very much alive communities as if they only exist back then. What we came to realize and wrap our heads around is, as we go through the work of being stewards of our environment, us collectively, us individuals at Coosa River Basin Initiative, as we approach this work, there is a perspective that is missing because the people that came here before are missing physically on this land. And so our goal was not to dwell on history, although you will get a little bit of history throughout the podcast, but our goal was to invite thought leaders, spiritual practitioners, activists, authors and poets to come join us and bring their perspectives on what is lacking in the conservation movement, what we could learn from a vastly different worldview than what we've inherited from the European settlers. What could those perspectives mean if folded into our more holistic approach and view at conservation work? And that's where we got Downstream, the Downstream podcast. We don't have any easy answers to fixing things that happened in the past. Downstream is a concept that we think a lot about as stewards of a watershed. All right, we're here in Rome, Georgia. If you followed any of the news related to PFAS, we know that we're downstream of carpet manufacturing. That's impacting our drinking water. Similarly, we're downstream in time to activities that none of us were there to condone. And yet, just like we have a responsibility to respond to the threat of PFAS in our drinking water, we have a responsibility now, downstream in history, to take an honest look and incorporate those voices into our conservation work with the hopes that as we move forward, we want our children to have cleaner drinking water. And we want our audience and our children to have a clearer perspective of what's missing in the conversation. So with that, I'm going to invite a couple of guests up here first. Courtney Altis, Communications Manager at Coosa River Basin Initiative, and Dr. Jim Watkins, professor here at Berry College in the English department. One of his areas of study is in Native American literature. We very early felt like we needed the grounding of somebody that had some of the history and some of the tradition in the literary context locked down. And so we were incredibly grateful that he joined us. And the three of us act as hosts for this podcast. And I want to get started by asking y'all a couple of questions. Jim, I'll start with you. What made you say yes? None of us have done a podcast before. I know that we talked to you early on as just kind of a stakeholder, and like at that point it was just spitballing ideas and yeah. But then we got you on the hook to work around your busy schedule, get in the studio and participate. So why? Why did you say yes?
Well, there's probably a few people here in this audience that know that I'm the kind of guy that will probably say yes just because I want to help. But I was fascinated with the project, and I, as long as it was understood that I was coming on as a fellow questioner. And I don't do a lot of research in Native American studies, but I have been teaching courses in it for a while, and I took some classes in graduate school. And then my whatever expertise I have in that is primarily literary, but I have some historical background and things like that. So when I heard about the project, I said, I want to get involved. Plus, as you know, I've been involved with CRBI for a long time. Really appreciate the work that you all do here. And y'all should know, Jesse is a Berry alum, so I wanted to say that too. He's doing great work that he got trained partially for at Berry to do, and he works with some of our Berry, Courtney and Jesse both work with Berry students in the summer primarily. Our Bonner scholars are helping them do water testing and other kinds of things. So I felt like I was helping some friends out and was very happy to say yes to that.
Oh, thank you. Class of 08. I was very young when I graduated. Thank you, Jim. And Courtney, I want to go to you. I've mentioned kind of some of our trepidations. So I have a two-part question. I'll ask it in two parts. The first thing is, what were you nervous about beginning this project? What kept you up at night?
Keeps me up at night. Yeah, I think just the complexity of the issues that we're facing and my ignorance as, a woman of European descent and a white woman working in a conservation organization and knowing that we're greatly lacking something, but not even fully being able to put a name to what it is that is missing. And to be humble enough to go to some of my helpers, Dr. Campbell, look at you, and saying, hey, help me fill this gap. Help me find the people who are going to be able to fill this gap. And I think I don't know, this is more of like how I overcame that issue, but the humility of just not knowing and admitting that you don't know, but you know something's wrong and you know something needs to change, and not really knowing what that looks like, but taking a step towards that. That's not what keeps me up at night anymore, but that's what gives me hope to go back to sleep.
Well, it gives you hope to push through the discomfort. Yeah. All right, so this will be kind of for both of you, and I'm completely putting them on the spot. I did not ask them these questions in advance, so you're just going to have to roll with it.
Great. You do that to me all the time.
Elevator pitch for the podcast itself. What is a big picture takeaway that you weren't expecting? What's something that, you know, we're talking big themes from our conversations, and we've had some varied conversations over the last, you know, several months. What's your pitch? What did you learn in this process?
Want me to answer
Yeah.
what you think about it? I had not heard that question before, but I have a lot of respect for the indigenous people that have kept their culture alive and all those things. But what I really saw with these interviews is every one of the people we interviewed is a problem solver. And they're looking at problems that affect us all, but affect some communities a lot more than others. And they're drawing on indigenous traditions and wisdom and knowledge to do that, but they're also thoroughly in the modern time and addressing the problems that confront their communities. Some of those are on the reservation and some of those are not. But every one of the people that we interviewed has found extremely practical ways to confront cultural erasure, pollution of tribal waters, and all the other things that indigenous people have been facing for centuries in this continent. So I was just so awestruck by just what great problem solvers these folks are.
I think to kind of build upon that is the thing that I really enjoyed from all of our conversations was the resilience and just the grit and the like determination to imagine being removed from your homelands in such a brutal way, to lose so much, and to still have the determination to show up and go to to the United Nations and go to these places and write plays and try to bring people into humor about what we've experienced, and to connect people. I think that for me was so expansive. I don't have a lot of words to put to it really, other than just listen to the conversations. They're incredible. The people who you're about to hear from and the people who you hear from in the podcast are so inspiring. And yeah, I think, that's, oh God.
Well, thank y'all both. I would invite y'all to help me give a round of applause for our other hosts on the show. So grateful for the insightful questions that we got along the way, and being able to kind of experience this growth with y'all. It was wonderful. Thank y'all. Next, I want y'all to join me in welcoming up a handful of guests that participated on the project. So you will hear long-form interviews with them as the episodes release. But for this launch event, we wanted to bring them up and have a little bit of interaction, where I've got a handful of questions primed. Again, I'm putting them on the spot. They haven't seen these questions. And then Courtney will be walking around with the microphone. So if you flag her down, if you want to ask a question, we'll have some time for y'all to speak with our guests as well. But if y'all will join me in welcoming Mary Crowe, member of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee, works as the Indigenous Just Transition Organizer for Indigenous Environmental Network. Reverend Chebon Kernell, who is Executive Director of the Native American Comprehensive Plan at United Methodist Church, ordained elder in the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference, and enrolled member of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, and is of Muskogee Creek heritage. And finally, LeAnne Howe, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, author, poet, playwright, multi-hyphenate. Is that fair? And Eidson Distinguished Professor in the Department of English at University of Georgia. So y'all welcome our guests, and y'all come join me up on the chairs. All right.
Yay.
We made it, y'all. Thank y'all so much for joining us for this conversation this evening. And we'll start with what I hope is an easy one. But I wanted to ask y'all, because we haven't had the chance to ask, the same question that I asked our friend Dr. Watkins. When Courtney approached you with the idea for this podcast, Downstream, Indigenous Perspectives on Conservation, what made you say yes? Why did you want to show up and participate? Any order, y'all. This is for everybody. I want y'all all to take a swing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Crowe. This is my life's work. Any opportunity that I have to come and talk with relatives, y'all are my relatives. I take that opportunity because it's important that we share our message with you all. And so anytime I get that opportunity, I'll take it.
I'll go next. I'm looking forward to having a conversation about environmental issues. This is something that we work on both as academics and then members of a tribe. I'm very, very proud of the Choctaw Nation and the things they've done today, including creating, I believe, almost 200 watersheds and reservoirs in the state of Oklahoma. When we came after removal in 1830, there was no water. That's the reason they moved us there, hoping that we would starve to death and then have no fresh water. So the Choctaw Nation and the Choctaw people began right away working on creating man-made reservoirs for our people. And because we're cattle raisers, farmers, this was extremely important. So today, we have created new facilities for our tribe in Durant, but outside of that location, they also created swampland because that's where we came from in the lower Mississippi Valley. So all these canes and swamp plants, the Choctaw Nation has begun. They haven't begun. It exists now right around the tribe, and it's places for our elders to have a quiet place to pray, to think. And I had the honor of being there just last year as that was getting underway. So that's part of my teaching at the University of Georgia.
Well, I'll do my best to answer the question. I think that my first response when I was approached about being a part of the project was like, how did you hear about my name? Like, how did you, the circles that I do operate in, the work that we do is really to assist in the efforts to maintain our literacy as Indigenous peoples, our identity and the things that we had even before contact with any non-Indigenous person. And the fact of the matter is that we're in a day and time when that literacy is at its lowest, even internally amongst our Indigenous peoples, amongst our tribal communities. And so whenever I have an opportunity, I always affiliate with some of the groups, whether it's a university, whether it's a museum, but those entities that are going to have contact with the most amount of people. Because also the fact of the matter that we have to wrestle with is that people that do have that cultural literacy, the actual practitioners of our spiritualities and the religions that we still carry, we're just hanging on by a thread today, all of us, all across the board. There's not that many, even amongst the numbers that you would see in a census counting of Indigenous peoples, that for the sake of my grandchildren, for the sake of their grandchildren, I make it an initiative to do wherever I can, wherever I can go all across the world, to talk about who we are as Native peoples, to actually make a distinction between us and the non-Indigenous populations, and try to support the work that's going on when it comes to this earth, when it comes to our existence, because the fact of the matter again is that we are never separated from the earth's well-being. We may be negligent of that, but we are never separated from her well-being. And this is what we shared earlier today, and I'm going to repeat, I'm going to quote you, that everybody in here is dependent upon this earth for water, for air, and for food. And the reality is we live in a world that we think we have dominion and stewardship over her, when in all reality is that she has stewardship over us. And she has been faithful to us, generation after generation. And even if we do not stop the damage that we see going on now, she will repair herself. What we have to realize is that the human species may not be a part of that repairing. That's the reality. And so for my children, and even not just Indigenous children, for all of our children, for those generations yet to come, we stand here hoping that in the conversation of conservation, change can occur. And so that's why I said I'll do it. And it did help that it was virtual too. I said, oh, I don't have to leave because I'm very aware of
And then we suckered you into the live event after.
And they did. But I have a full schedule tomorrow too. So.
Right. Thank you all. It's so fun. I've been in on these conversations, and these answers and Chebon, what you just said are still giving me chills, which is pretty wonderful. One of the themes that came up, I felt like in a lot of the conversations, we know that there are a lot of connections between spirituality and rituals and the environment and all of the Indigenous communities that were here. But now we kind of live in an age where conservation is relegated only to science thinking. And it's not until very recently that we have, some forms of Christianity, using topics like creation care, just now beginning to think that perhaps there is a part of being good stewards or recognizing the importance of the healthy environment as a part of our spirituality. So I would love to ask y'all just to reflect a little bit about that tension. What are we missing in that conservation work when we exclude spirituality, and what do we have to gain when we embrace that?
Wow. That's a broad question right there. Bring it in. I was born member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee. And I'm blessed because my bloodline went to Oklahoma during the removal and came back. My grandmother was a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, of the 5 civilized tribes of Oklahoma. And I often wondered why we were given that. Those that are sitting here, my brother and sister here in Oklahoma, that's what they called us, the 5 civilized tribes. And what did that mean? Civilized to whose definition, right? And so when we talk about pre-contact for the arrival of your relatives, and I like whenever we talk about land acknowledgement, I always tell folks, well, I know where I'm at. And why should I have to come to tell you and acknowledge that? So I ask you, can you give a land acknowledgement? Where did your relatives come? Because a lot of times we think, oh, well, that was way back in history, and that's, and it was. But we carry something that we call historic trauma. We carry generational trauma. And that's happening today. It's happening to the Ukrainians. It's happening to the Palestinians. It happened to the Syrians when their own leaders in Syria turned on their own people. Dictatorship, these things that happen, right? And so your relatives, wherever your roots came from, I know your ancestors didn't say, oh, I don't like this place anymore. I believe I get up and go somewhere else. You were forced. Either by religion, either by governments, either by war. It's all entwined. And when you look at where we're at today, if you see what's going on in these United States today, the social, the economic, things that are going around, right? And we as indigenous peoples, we live on our lands, our traditional territories. I'm blessed to say that I do. But a lot of our indigenous relatives were displaced to other places too. And so just like Agidohi, my brother right here, he said this morning, we talked about the leeks, the ramps, right? The plants that are in my area of the Great Smoky Mountains. We talked about how when we moved to Oklahoma, that we found the relative of the leek out there, and that was the wild onion.
Yeah. Yep.
Finding those relatives of the plants, finding those relatives of the animals. And so when we talk about that spiritual connection, like I said, I was raised in a Baptist church. I was forced to know that Bible. And then it was used against my own people to tell me that I could not participate who I am as a Aniuia, as Cherokee. I couldn't practice my language, and that language that we have is our connection to everything and to the earth. And so when we talk about that spiritual connection, we all have it. You all have it. You had it within your families, wherever your families came from. They had that spiritual connection, and something came in and uprooted it, just like it did our people, right? And so then, instead of having that goodness and that caring of who we are as human beings to the earth, we then grew angry and hateful and carrying animosity, that we couldn't even look at our own neighbor, that we can't even look at one another as human beings and as relatives. And so I always like to use this example this morning, and I'll be quiet. Whoa, it must be my time up. But we talked this morning about the Bible. And in the Bible, it does say that there were two animals that talked in the Bible. Does any of you know who the two animals were in the Bible that talked? One was a jackass. One was a jackass. What was the other? The serpent. So that tells me that the animals spoke. I was told to believe the Bible, right? Well, in our stories, we have the same creation stories, that the plants and the animals were here first before the humans, just like in the Bible. And in our stories, they could talk, the plants, the animals. So when Creator put the humans on the earth, in our stories, it says that the animals got mad at the humans because the humans were very disrespectful and rude and mean, and they didn't like them. And so they went into council, and they decided to bring diseases upon the humans. Someone had pity on us, and that was the plant relatives. And the plant relatives went into council, and they said, hey, we have to respect what Creator made and put on this earth. Well, we don't like the humans either, right? There'll be a medicine, a cure for every disease that comes. The humans just have to be smart enough to know what it is. Now, where I'm from, the Great Smoky Mountains, it's one of the last of the biodiverse areas in the world. They're finding new species in there every day. We sustain ourselves from those mountains. The plants, the animals. This is Creator talking to you right here, guys. Yeah. But the plants and the animals and us living there, we had that relationship And we had that respect, and we know that when we go take from the land of plants, that we only take to sustain us. We always talk about us being less than 1% of the population in the United States, but 90% of the natural resources that the United States and corporations want is on federal lands, mostly federal native lands. And so our fight is against the fossil fuel industry. These things that are going on right now. How many of you have heard of Standing Rock, right? Standing Rock, the voices up there were saying, water is life, water is life. We had the Protecting Mother Earth Conference in 1996 in Cherokee, North Carolina. And the theme then was Our Rivers Are Life. And at that time, we were fighting against the paper plants. The big paper plants in Western North Carolina. Champion Paper Mill just closed down this past summer. When we look at these things, it took 25 years from 1996 until just last summer for that paper plant to close down. But look at how much pollution that went into those rivers. Drinking water. Standing Rock was trying to stop Dakota Access Pipeline from going under the Missouri River. The Missouri River has water, fresh water for 16 million people downstream. When you're looking at Colorado River, because of the drought, your major cities of Phoenix, Los Angeles, Vegas, rerouted all that water. And now you've got communities in Scottsdale, Arizona, where they're cutting people off. Big houses. The excessive waste that we use. So when we come to talk to you, when I come to talk to you, I ask you to look at yourself, because I know what I was forced to do, just like you guys, forced to assimilate and acculturate into this way of thinking, into this ideology that's what it is. I don't want to point nothing out. Single-use plastic, right? I appreciate it. I appreciate the cold water, but I know that causes dioxin. I know that causes all of these chemicals where you can't eat the fish, you can't go you see what I'm saying? So to be consciously aware, how do you and us, we learn together? We have to, number one, stop this consumption. Get away from these corporations, get away from the things that, are so excessive. Do you really need those things? Is it really good for you? But more than anything else, what is your spiritual connection to Creator? You don't have to be in church. You don't have to be whatever. It's an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement, like when you take your shoes off and you walk in that grass and you feel that, right? That's what we're talking about, that connection. So with that, thank you. That was a big, big question.
Well, I want to put that question to you, Chebon, because I know that you have some thoughts. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've worked with the United Methodist Church globally at kind of coming to grips with some of that painful history that we talked about.
I don't know if they've come to grips with anything, to be quite honest. But I do think the experience, I wish I teach classes on indigenous spiritual traditions and our wrestling with colonizing Christianity. We don't have time for a class worth of discussion here because it's very complicated. And really the fact of the matter is I maintain my presence within the Christian circles because, in my opinion, it is to this day one of the most violent entities to indigenous peoples across the world. And my hope is that through maybe somehow the work that I do, some of that violence can end. And my hope is that internationally, indigenous peoples will not have to go through what indigenous peoples of North America have gone through. Dispossession of land, the intergenerational trauma that we just heard about, all of these things. And so to think about the question is, how do we approach this from a lens that is more broader? I think I'll just use myself as an example because whatever it is that people classify me today, I think on one of my papers, I don't mind it. I think it said I'm an activist. Well, I guess so. I mean, if that's what you call me. Do I care about our forests? Yes. Have I been to our Weelaunee Forest in Atlanta for the past 3 years? Yes. Have I pleaded with the city of Atlanta to not tear it down? Yes. Have I told them about the lunacy of militarizing any type, privatizing police forces? Yes. Does that make me an activist? I guess. Wanting to live? Wanting my children and our grandchildren to live? And I think about those things because I didn't set out to do that. Even within the confines of Christianity, I didn't set out to do the work that I did, but somehow, year after year, a question was asked of me. Can you help us? Can you raise our literacy? Can you somehow educate us on what's going on? And I said, okay, I'll do my best. But the fact of the matter is that this country has very much a nationalistic understanding of what Christianity is and not even a historical understanding of what Christianity is. Because if we did, we would understand that the essence of what is a Christian is to deny one's own existence so that your neighbor has a right to exist with nothing in return. That's not what we see going on in our country and other countries like ours. So somehow, where do we have that conversation to bring us back to a moment of understanding our place in all of the biodiversity and the ecosystems that we are a part of? Because every time we are negligent of what we're doing, we're harming someone. This morning I talked about, we shared a little bit about 7 generations ahead. And in our Muskogee language, what I shared is we have that same concept of Hoboy Doc Chagexagot, which is those children that are yet to come, is that we're mindful of them. I come here because I want them to have a way of life. I want them to have the medicinal plants, like my relative was sharing here, that have taken care of us. And we've lost the reverence, we've lost the intimacy that we once had with the very ground that we walk on. When I come here to my homelands, and I said this to the Atlanta City Council on June 5th when they were voting to approve funding for the destruction of the Weelaunee Forest, I said, I don't consider myself from out of town. I said, the very steps that I take here, this forest knows me because it birthed our clan system, it birthed our language, it birthed our people. And I'm never going to think of myself as an outsider. To give you an example of that is that our Muskogee language was developed all throughout the south of here, all the way into Alabama, all the way up to the Tennessee River Valley. Like I said, there's no hard boundaries. Our villages were interchanged in different places. And one of the words, I won't say what planet it is, and I won't say the word in my language, but because it's private. But one of the things that we say is that when there's a special plant that we use to take care of ourselves, the essence of that word, what it means is that when it sees a young person, a young boy that's walking by that's going to be a chief or a miko or Muskogee of one of our ceremonial idolwas, our towns, it says that plant, it weeps with joy because that person is in its presence. That's the name of that plant. We still use that today. That's the intimacy that we had with this world, with this earth. We've lost that. And as young people, whatever your major is, whatever your field is going to be, building on initiatives such as this, is that somehow we have to come back to that reverence. We believe that water is alive. We believe there's a spirit in that water. We believe that this earth is alive. We believe that there's a spirit there. We believe that these animals will take care of us too, that there's a spirit there, and that at one time we were in harmony. Our country was founded with different principles of commodifying and selling anything that could be sold. And we're still doing that to this day. So I challenge you is that when you look at each other, when you look at this world, you can't say, well, how much is that worth? How much money can I make? Because that's going to be ultimately our doom. Because we're going to be sitting here with the arsenal of military weapons on one side and a stack of money on the other, but we won't be able to breathe. We won't have anything to drink. And even I'm a part of international conversations right now that are challenging those capitalistic systems that are there. And even in those conversations, I was in Indonesia about 1.5 years ago, and we sat there and talked to one of the presenters, and this is supposed to be like a very open conversation challenging capitalism. They said, that person said, well, money has been around forever. And I looked, And no one noticed it. We normalized it. I said, money has not been around forever. There was a day and time if someone was thirsty, you gave them water. There was a day and time if someone was in medical need, you would say, oh, well, this person over here knows how to do this. Maybe you should go talk to them. Maybe they'll go get something that will help you. Not, well, how much will you charge? That's the foundation of our cultures, of the representatives that are here. And it was a way of life that was here for thousands upon thousands of years. And something had to be right in it. So today, I want to bring us back to that spirituality. Now, there are plenty of Christian texts. I do have scholarship in, I can talk more about church stuff.
Yeah, we can.
But there's stuff there that can justify that. But somehow we have to come back to that understanding of that this world isn't just here for us to take. We're a part of a bigger system. And there's more I could say, but I'm taking too much time.
No, I appreciate it. I love what you bring up with the conversation about that, the intimacy and the connection with the natural world. And I remember in my own youth, Mary, I think this came up when we spoke in the interview. I grew up a preacher's kid in a church where the environment was not a bother. It was nothing that was ever considered. And, you know, the line was, you know, go have dominion over the earth. And that was treated as, you know, drill, baby, drill, like just go for it, let it rip. And that always felt so wrong for me. And I remember one day rereading, you know, Genesis, the Christian creation story, when Adam and Eve are tasked with naming everything, which to me came across as such an intimate act, an intimate invitation to connect, to see something and call it by a name. Which felt just completely incongruous. So I'm glad that you brought that up. LeAnne, I want to give you a swing at the question, but I want to twist the lens a little bit for you. I am interested still in how we bring the spirituality in, but for you specifically, in your career, I want to ask, what role does humor and art play in connecting us back to these concepts?
Well, I will, and I want to circle back to something that my friend over here said. But I grew up in a community where all of my family were storytellers, especially in our gatherings in Ada, Oklahoma. And so everybody told a story around the dinner table or after dinner or before dark. And then as we would finish eating, then my family would continue to tell stories, go out on the front porch. They all played instruments, guitars, the fiddle. My grandfather was a fiddler. And so all of those events culminated around storytelling and how we were part of the larger community of Indian people in Oklahoma and in Ada, and of course in our family. So I think I've lost the thread of your question.
So what role does art, storytelling, humor? Yeah.
Humor was something that happened at the end of the dinner and the dinner time, and somebody was going to tell a story, and we just followed that path around all the family members, even to some of the kids. And so we grew up understanding that we'd laugh and that it was really healthy for us. And that's the way that every Sunday in my family, there was a huge gathering at my grandmother's house, which is my house. I live there in Oklahoma when we're back from teaching. And today, all of my family still gathers in our home and tell stories and laugh. I don't know if that answered your question, but I suspect everybody's family has, when you get together, you tell stories and you laugh. And that in itself is very healing. So that's how I grew up. I grew up with a huge family of tellers, and my name is Anolatubbee. It's Choctaw for tells and kills, and I can hopefully kill you with laughter. And it's my goal in all my work to be able to finish up and you laugh, you cry, and then I'll kill you with laughter. Maybe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will get to audience questions in just a minute. So if you're thinking about something, you can flag down Courtney. And as she's walking around, I'm going to ask one more question. And I mean this has to be a short answer, rapid fire. If you could give this audience here today one takeaway, one thing that you want them to know, or one thing that they could pursue in themselves, considering learning as we talk about this subject, what would that be?
Go out and plant something.
That's practical advice.
Yeah, seriously, take it upon yourselves. There are all kinds of things that need to be planted, and they're not all just food. So we need to constantly make the world a better place through the relationship we have. We have a strong relationship with the plants around us, the living environment. So go out and plant something. Care for it. Care for it, and it will care for you.
Shooting from the hip, reduce consumption. Right now, the demand for our diets in the United States is what's creating, it is the primary perpetuator of harm against the entire planet, and specifically the beef industry. To produce the amount of beef that is consumed in the United States, it takes so much energy that is what's creating the climate disruption that we see. I was a part of some conversations a year ago. So there's more to that consumption. There's all kinds of ways, but it starts with understanding that consumption.
Thank you.
I would say be an activist. We need your help. We need your help in elections. You know, this United States government was built for you all, not us.
That's right.
The policies of the United States, that they are taking our land and everything else and the resources around that. So we need your help. You have to start understanding how your government structure works. Participating in voting. My dad was a World War II veteran. He didn't become a citizen. Wasn't even a citizen of the United States. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, our people fought in all these foreign wars because they were foreign to us. There's a place around here called Ball Ground. You're close here, right? That's where our relatives played, the Choctaws, Muskogees, the Cherokees. That's how we settled our differences. Because we had respect for the human life and the human spirit. And so, if you take anything away from it, I ask you, is to participate. Stand up, say something. When I showed the film at Standing Rock, I asked the group, I had a Creations Cares conference the first of the month. I asked the audience, what did you see? And one lady said, I seen them always in prayer. I said, yes, because we were always in prayer every time we went out. Nonviolent direct action. Who was the first nonviolent revolutionary? Jesus, isn't it? Right? And so when we're talking about these things of you as our younger relatives coming up in this world and being faced with all of this crazy, crazy stuff, right? And I know it's real easy just to block it out and not even think about that. It's real easy until it affects you and your family. all I say is don't allow it and let it affect you and your family. Say something, do something, participate, help us out.
Thank you. To the audience, feel free to flag down Courtney. Does anybody have any questions for our guests?
Thanks. I have a question for Miss LeAnne Howe. Your book, Shell Shaker, has been one of my favorite things I've read here at Berry College so far. And I love the way that you balance kind of the past and present and how they expand on each other's stories and tell them differently. And I was wondering if there's something in conservation that you see that we can do to kind of finish the past stories or integrate the past. How do the past and present affect each other in conservation?
My feeling is you have to know the past or you cannot affect the future. You have to know your family. You have to know the place that you've lived in. The land where we live has enormous amounts of history to tell us what plants were here before. How do we integrate easy for me to say. How do we improve on what has happened before? And we have to know where we've been before we can plot the future. So that's being part of the past, present, and future. Be part of that, but know where you came from, where you are now, and where we're going. And I have faith that the young people today, the people in this audience, my colleagues, my family, I have a huge family at home, my friends up here on talking with me, I believe that we are all working and can work toward the same thing. If you can't remember, plant something, talk to the plants all around you. They talk back to us. That's something I learned from my relatives. The plants are talking. They tell us what they need. And I believe that we can do this together. So that's what I think has to be done.
Hi, I'm Camille. I'm a major in international affairs and anthropology, so this is really exciting to be here with you guys today. I had a question about how you guys feel the international community incorporates Indigenous people and their perspectives and voices on environmental issues. I've seen and been studying a lot about like the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights. Like, do you feel like they're doing things adequately, or do you feel like there needs to be more gaps that should be addressed?
Take it away, Chebon.
I was going to let you. I can try.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And it wasn't expressed, but I do have a relationship with some of our gatherings internationally. I do sit on a couple of our groups of Indigenous peoples, namely with, I'm not on the Indigenous Peoples Forum that is held annually, but I sit there and I monitor those conversations and even represent our people. We just, some of our folks, even from the Indigenous Environmental Network, myself and others came back from Dubai from the 1st of December, where the Conference on Parties took place about climate disruption. And all of us are there trying to have an impact and influence on, from an Indigenous perspective, on these agreements that are being made on, how much damage can we allow is really what's going on. Like, is it okay to do this? And if so, can we pay money if we are doing damage? So what I would say is like these conventions that you see, there's the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples that meets annually in Geneva in July. There's the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues that's about to meet in April. There's these mechanisms. I will say there was a time when there were no mechanisms.
Right.
Philip Deere, our elders,
Right.
they went and petitioned and pounded on the doors of the United Nations to say, wait a second, you don't even acknowledge us. We've come leaps and bounds to here. But at the same time, that is not the solution. To actually allow our existence as indigenous peoples. Like I said, it may have been tongue-in-cheek, it may have been in jest, but I'm serious when I say these cultures and identities, these things, these ways of living have been here for millennia upon millennia upon millennia. This country of the United States is only 238 years old,
Like that, yeah.
I think, this July. It's still in diapers compared to our cultures.
That's right.
And so while we spend billions of dollars to go all the way to the Middle East to talk about this, all you have to do is look at these cultures that are still living in the same way, that's in a non-consuming, just for a subsistence living. So what I say is that it is a part of the solution, but it's not the solution in itself. I think a lot of people had, when we started doing our side events, doing our interventions is what they call it, giving our presentations, saying it to these gatherings, is they said, "You've made it, congratulations, you made it." You know, they say that a lot to us when we go, and I'm like, we didn't do anything.
Right.
I said, when we get our land back, then I'm gonna say we made it. When my grandchildren have water to drink, then we made it. When I got one grandson. When he comes up to me and says, "Boja, Iji no gauges," I'm going to say it back to him, meaning, "Grandpa, I love you." Speaking in our Muskogee Obonaga, our language. When I see that happening. Now, right now, I don't know. I think right now we're going in a direction where we see genocide taking place right before our eyes. The same thing where our ancestors were taken. Oklahoma is my home, but it's not my homeland. My ancestors are buried south of here for generations. My grandparents are buried now in Oklahoma, my mom and dad. Until that changes, I don't think I'm worried. I'm worried. But I do think it's better than it was. And so my hope is that, like we said, we can't do this alone. We didn't get in this problem ourselves. We need people to stand with us and to say enough is enough. Give up our privilege that we have and start doing the things that need to be done. I think we'll celebrate it, but we'll say we're not done yet.
Right.
Is how I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you. I saw a hand back there, Courtney. Yeah, there in the back.
The Cherokee Nation was promised representation in U.S. Congress, if I understand it right. That's a promise that we, the United States, have not made good on yet.
Right.
You have a delegate, I believe a woman by the name of Kimberly Teehee,
That's right.
who has not been seated as your delegate.
Right.
Is there any movement on that, and is there anything that we could be doing to try and put our voices behind that, to try and have that small step towards equality, to have that proper representation that was promised so long ago?
We have a saying called honor the treaties. Honor the treaties. That came from the Treaty of New Echota. Mind you, the majority of my people say that that was a wrong thing to happen to our people. I just came from Major Ridge's house over here at the Chieftain Museum. His son John Ridge and Vice Boonot, and maybe a handful of others signed the Treaty of New Echota, Georgia, 1838, that forced the removal. We signed a petition. It's laying up there at the Smithsonian at the Museum of the Native American. We're at the last Grand Council at Red Clay, Tennessee. The chiefs went into all the communities and had all of our relatives sign a petition. That petition, like I said, was almost a mile long. And we ran it to Congress. And something happened that made Congress stop meeting. I think there was a duel or something that happened. And the legislation and our petition to come up to stop the removal never got seen by Congress. So what you're talking about, that representative, is from that Treaty of New Echota, that there would be a delegate into Congress. And that delegate has been named. But as you see, that hasn't been seated. If you're a law student, you'll learn case studies of the Supreme Court. One of them is Cherokee versus Georgia, and the other is Worcester versus Georgia, where we were recognized as a sovereign nation. But what did that mean? Didn't mean nothing, because Andrew Jackson said, well, let the Supreme Court enforce it. Those words, those last words, let the Supreme Court enforce it, just was said publicly here in 2024, not more than 2 weeks ago, because of the issues that are coming up to the Supreme Court right now for a specific candidate in politics who said that his hero was Andrew Jackson.
Imagine.
So when we look at what's going on in today's world, like I said, we participated. We've elected Native peoples into these positions. We had Deb Haaland. She's our now Secretary of the Department of the Interior, first Native woman to be a head of a cabinet under the president. Ironically, those of us that are federally recognized are under that cabinet with the Department of the Interior, along with the Department, with the Bureau of Land Management, the National Parks. We're the only society of people that is under a cabinet of the President of the United States. But we have treaties. Those 580 that are under that cabinet have treaties that are considered sovereign nations. So you see what I'm saying? So whenever we can, as Brother Chebon said, break those weren't our creations. Those were Founding Fathers' creations. We always say that was written against the wild savages, the merciless Indian savages. If you read the Articles of the Confederacy, that's where your Second Amendment right to bear arms comes from, is to kill us. So
I was planning to ask this, and then you brought up the Major Ridge home, and I was curious what your thoughts would be if we were able as a community to repatriate or rematriate the Major Ridge home to the Eastern Band. To create an educational center on the Oostanala, something along those lines.
I don't think you could, and I don't think the Eastern Band would. Not to be some way, but it's not just the Eastern Band. You have the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. There's 20,000, approximately 20,000 members of the Eastern Band in Koala Boundary in Cherokee, North Carolina, and Western North Carolina, because our territory is checkerboard over the far western 5 counties. The majority of Cherokee Nation, 350,000 citizens, and they have districts in the state of Denver and Colorado, California, Arizona, Texas. Yep. So whenever you see how, when you're talking about giving it back to just one group, you can't. Because then you have the United Gadua Band, who is also federally recognized. They're about 20,000, like the Eastern Band. But we've all been giving that recognition, right? Right? And the same with the Muskogee, the same with the Choctaw. These are some of the things that, the policies of the United States government. I always say that in the treaties it says as long as the grass grows and the water flows, well, guess what? The grass isn't growing and the water isn't flowing, so the United States should just give it back. Let us be the leaders and the stewards in fighting against climate change.
I want to invite you all to join me in giving a round of applause for our guests again.